Another dreadful result for Manchester United in the Premier League, Gary. 2-0 against West Ham. The first goal went in just before the stroke of half time. Yarmolenko with the goal. Did you feel at that point United were gone? Did you kind of get the feeling there wasn't any way back for them, the way they played in that first half?
No, I didn't feel that, but I did feel that it was a massive question that was going to be asked of Manchester United in that second half, because I've seen a lot of United, certainly over pre-season, at the beginning of this season, and there's been spells where they've been very good. But second half, they've been struggling. Started the second half brilliantly. They came out 2 or 3 minutes before West Ham, so that you can understand that Solskjaer's probably sent them out there and said, listen, get us out of the mess that we're in. And I felt like they were knocking on the door. But I just felt at times that they were lacking that quality, that final pass. They were struggling at times to link play into Rashford. He got frustrated, certainly in that first half. And I just didn't feel, having watched so much of Manchester United, that they were going to get back into it, and that's because they've struggled for goals. It's as simple as that. This is not a Manchester United team that invariably, if you got a goal against them, that you got a goal against them, that you would suddenly be pinned back late on. I never felt that they were ever going to turn it round.
Just from, because you spoke to Joe on air about maybe the larger problems at Old Trafford, but specifically looking at this game, where do you think the failings were, in the sense that, like, I'm looking at the Yarmolenko goal, Ashley Young at left back, you cannot question his attitude. Like, he is one of those players, he goes out, he gives 100%, but he's 34 years of age now. They're relying on a 34-year-old, a player who was originally a left midfielder, he was never a left full. Is that a real weak point in that United team?
No, I don't believe that, to be perfectly honest. I don't think about age in terms, I think sports science allows you to play longer, and I don't think he is potentially that big a weak link to justify the results we're seeing. And it wasn't in isolation, it wasn't just on what I'd seen today, it's what I've seen at the back end of last season. Losing to Cardiff, losing to Huddersfield, and then being told, and this big spin of there's going to be a massive change, Manchester United about challenging at the top. Now suddenly we're talking about it's going to be 3 or 4 years, and the question I asked was, what are Manchester United fans thinking right now? Because he's a fan's favourite, he's an iconic figure at this club. Of course he is, but judge him on his merits as a manager, not as a player in terms of what he's done. And Joe obviously is a Manchester United fan, because he didn't like to hear any criticism of Solskjaer, did he? And it's not necessarily criticism about him, because I know him a little bit. He was on my A licence. I know Mike Phelan, who was on my management diploma, and I know Michael Carrick from playing. These are great guys. They are, and they're Manchester United through and through. And as I said to Joe, on a romantic notion, I want to see these iconic figures leading the club back to former past glories as such. But just look at what he's doing as manager and look at his record. And everyone use it as stick to beat the previous ones who replaced Ferguson in Moyes, Van Gaal and Mourinho. And just because he is one of your own, don't ignore the actual results that we're seeing. And Joe was.
Well, okay, that's fair enough, Gary, but what about the players that they've brought in? How much control does Solskjaer have over those signings? Are these sanctioned above his head by Ed Woodward? Does he have any control whatsoever in the kind of players that he wants to bring in to play the kind of football he wants to play?
Well, listen, he's been given huge investment to bring 3 British players in, Wan-Bissaka, Maguire and Daniel James, in keeping with the philosophy of old United teams, young stars who've got potential to step up to Manchester United, and they've done just that. So I think he has got a backing from Edward Woodward. And listen, loads of people are going to have moments and accuse him of his sins in terms of what he's done over the period since Ferguson retired and David Gill moved on, but he's backed his manager. So just judge what we're seeing.
I suppose Brian Kerr made an interesting point on air with you guys as well. They're missing Pogba, they're missing Luke Shaw, they've got a lot of bad injuries, Anthony Martial. Again though, we've seen from those players last season, sometimes their attitude isn't great, and if they come back into the side fit, can they make a difference?
Fabulous player, Pogba, of course he isn't, but being a Manchester United player and a leader in that central midfield, you're judged by the highest standards. Roy Keane, Paul Scholes, these type of guys, Michael Carrick. So I don't have any questions about his ability, there's no doubt about that. But I'm talking about not just today that those players are missing, I'm talking about the back end of last season, when we're now looking at, I might not be correct on this, but 2 Premier League wins in 11. Those guys were playing in a lot of those games. He's the manager. Listen, I just want a bit of context here. That's all I'm asking for, in terms of, it's all well and good the manager saying I'm judging whether or not these players are good enough for Manchester United. I think a lot of people now are going to ask, is Solskjaer good enough as a manager of Manchester United? That's just the question I'm putting out there to most United fans.
We can't ignore West Ham's performance this afternoon. It was fantastic from back to front. How good can this West Ham team get? Because I'm looking out there as well at that team, and I'm thinking there's not a huge amount of pace in that West Ham team. You know, Pablo Fornals comes in, he's not a pacey player. You know, you've got Mark Noble there, wouldn't be known for his pace. You've got Yarmolenko out right again. Like, all very good quality players, but if you're lacking that bit of pace in your attacking 4, 5 or 6 players, how good can you actually be in this Premier League?
Well, I think ultimately, in terms of quality, I think on their day West Ham have real quality. It's consistency that they're lacking and have been over the last 3 or 4 seasons. Mark Noble, the captain, Mr. West Ham, has said this is the best group of players that he's had in all his time there. You've got a manager in Pellegrino, he's a winner. He's experienced. Now he's talking about getting the mentality right here. And they showed that today. At times the game was at risk. They blocked it up. I looked at his substitutions. He brought Wilshere on, made a huge difference in terms of getting on the ball. And he's not a pacey player, but when he's got the ball, you can't get it off him. And it just gave that West Ham back four, midfield a breather, got him up the pitch. They were able to see the result out. It's a big challenge for West Ham. They're on the cusp of something special potentially here with this massive new stadium. The fans are all in alignment now with the owners and the manager and the players, and that's a great thing to have. So it's up to them. It's literally up to them, but they will certainly be the team alongside Leicester. We're looking at Everton and Wolves. They've fallen in terms of being that potentially the best of the rest, but the club who can challenge United for that top 6 place. I think at this stage, early on in the season, it looks like it's West Ham or Leicester.
And crucially, if you're not conceding goals, you're going to get up that table, and they've kept 4 clean sheets in a row now, including the EFL Cup match. That's going to be a huge factor for them as well.
It's massive. It's so big in terms of just having that foundation at the back to build from. We've seen the difference that the best centre-half in the world has made to Liverpool, but look at the difference he's made. Look at the difference that Fernandinho made as a converted central midfielder. Has that composure, steps into the back yesterday for Manchester City. I know that it was a drubbing, a mauling of Watford, but you just want centre-halves who, when the ball goes up to them, it doesn't go through them and they don't get turned easily, that they're able to head it or take control of the ball and put the opposition on the back foot. And those type of defenders do that. In terms of partnerships, they looked impressive. Ogbonna, Diop, real physical presence, bit of pace as well. And then you've got Winston Reid, Balbuena as well. They look like they've got good shape about West Ham. I'd be interested to see how they cope with the remainder of this season.
Before we let you go home, Gary, as well, I wanted to speak to you about another centre-half, but a man who wears the green shirt when on international duty, Shane Duffy. Look, we're not going to get too panicky now. It's early stages in the season, but there's a little bit of concern that Shane is starting to get left out of the side a bit more by the Brighton boss, Graham Potter. We knew that he wanted to play a different style of football when he came up and took over at Brighton after doing so well in the Championship. Are you a little bit worried now about what's happening with Shane Duffy?
It's a challenge for Shane, and if I think of all the challenges that have been put in front of that young man, he's took them on. He really has. You think about a bad injury he got, gets into the Ireland squad at a time when you're thinking he's just making his mark, instant impact, similar to in terms of what he did at Brighton, goes into the Premier League, does that again. So this is another challenge. Now, we don't know, but he's got to make a decision based on the fact that I think he'll take the challenge on. In terms of what I know of him, I don't know him personally, I can only judge him what I'm seeing. I think he'll take that challenge on, but he may well look at the scenario and think, well, listen, no matter how well I play, I'm not going to get the nod. And effectively, if they're playing 3 centre-halves at Brighton at the moment, as they are doing, in contrast to 2 last year, at the moment he's 4th choice. Now, he may well have a decision to make, but if you're asking me, is he the type that takes that challenge on and says, I'm going to prove you wrong? I'd say absolutely he is. And he's been magnificent for Ireland. And although he may not be getting his game, not for one moment will Mick McCarthy be worried about that. He'll be nailed on to start Ireland's games.
What is it just about Graham Potter and the way he plays, the way he wants his team to play, why do you think it is that Shane is starting to be left out now?
I think ultimately because it's more expansive, they like to play it from the back, it's through the thirds, and if you think about Shane's strengths, that's probably not one of them. But don't underestimate how important it is to have a centre-half, who I've just mentioned earlier, that dominates that area in front of his goal, which he does. And
he reads the game really well too, doesn't he?
He does. He gets himself into good positions and stuff like that. And I think at times for Ireland, there's no doubt he's been protected in terms of how deep we play on the 18-yard box under Martin O'Neill and midfielders in front of him. It's so difficult to get past him. But he's more than that. He's an offensive threat for us as well, at times our only one. But I think he can play further up the pitch in terms of not being scared of the space in behind. I think Mick McCarthy will teach him that. Listen, Mick McCarthy, was a centre-half who wasn't the quickest. He squeezed the pitch and he was up against the likes of Van Basten, Hullet, Schillaci, Lineker. So no better man to teach him it. But if you're talking about and ask me the question, what will Shane Duffy do? Will he go into his shell? I don't believe that for one moment.